I'm Spencer Knowledge Fearon of Sky Sports Ringside Toe to Toe Boxing Podcast and hashtag Toe to Toe. And you're watching Lights Out.
You, not the camera, right?
You look at whoever you want. Lights Out, FAISAL Khan, joined by Adam Morallee. Adam, how you doing?
Very well, thanks, mate.
Saturday night at the Lamech Stadium, Alexander Ustinov. The last time we spoke to you, there wasn't an opponent confirmed, but now there is. Ustinov is a very experienced fighter. He's been in the ring with some big names in the heavyweight division. Just talk to us about the thinking behind Ustinov and how confident are you that Joe will get the win on Saturday night?
Yeah, we signed a deal with Frank Warren for Joe to have big fights, and actually this fight isn't part of the kind of big fight package we did with Frank. It was after we Joe's just come with Adam Booth, just started training with Adam Booth, and effectively wanted a warm-up, tick-over fight. And I think that Ustinov is a bit bigger than that. It's a serious opponent. George suggested it to us. Joe will take anyone put in front of him, and I think that he's a good yardstick. You know, a lot of people say Ustinov's old, but he's a serious opponent with a serious pedigree who's been in the ring with some very serious names.
Well, you know, you're never too old in boxing, especially when you look at how old, Vladimir Klitschko was, how old Bernard Hopkins was. Speaking of Ustinov, have you watched any of his fights, and what have you made of him as a professional?
I mean, about a year ago we tried to get Ustinov for Joe because we thought that was the right fight, and he was just priced out of our price bracket for Joe because he's a very serious level opponent. So yeah, I mean, I think he's incredibly durable. I watched his Hunter fight. Of course he's not that quick, and people joke about Joe and call him slow-mo Joe, and Ustinov's not quick, but he's very, very durable and very experienced, and I think Joe will learn a lot in the fight.
What type of a game plan has Joe just got taken to his fight Saturday night? Because it's a guy that he can't, take too lightly, and he's a very, very, very experienced opponent, is Alexander Ustinov.
Things like game plan is Adam Booth's department, and Joe and Adam are working on 2 or 3 different things, which hopefully you'll see Saturday night. You'll see it in terms of an evolution from Joe's fight against Deverne to here, but it's just the start. I think we'll really see how Joe's collaborated with Adam Booth when Joe fights July 13th and subsequently. So Adam's working on very specific things, but obviously I'm not going to say what they are.
You mentioned the last fight was against Bermain Deverne, and then of course now it's Ustinov, and then there's talks on July 13th could be for the European title against Kabayel. You're also looking at Derek Chisora, even Manuel Shah. I mean, so overall you're happy with the names that Joe Joyce is getting put in the ring with, and am I right to believe in that? Perhaps maybe next year is where you would expect Joe Joyce to be challenging the likes of Anthony Joshua, maybe even Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury for that world title, if Tyson Fury is world champion at the time. Yeah,
look, I think this is the right evolution for Joe. Those names, Kabayel, Char, Povetkin, Chisora, these are all people Joe wants to fight with. Through George is making offers for those fights. Parker, all those names we're looking at, and we'll see what we get. It might not be one of those guys, but it will be someone of that level. And then, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think, towards 2020 is when we're looking at a big fight for Joe, whether that's a Tyson Fury or a Deontay Wilder or an Anthony Joshua. But a lot of that is determined by politics. I mean, you've seen with Dillian Whyte, he got himself into a mandatory position, and he's been in that position for a very long time. So Dillian would have thought he would be fighting one of those names within the last 12 to 18 months, but he hasn't. So I think Joe will get into position, and it's kind of my job, Sam's job, to make sure when he gets into that position, we work alongside his promoter, which is Frank and George and Richard Schaefer, and we use those, we do our work to get him that fight. I mean, for me, Joe will take any of those guys on. He obviously offered himself to Anthony on 1st of June. I think, that Wilder's with PBC, and Joe's fought on PBC. Tyson Fury has a relationship with Frank Warren, Joe's with Frank Warren. Those 2 fights seem to me the most makeable.
Everyone was, thinking at one point July 13th it would be Daniel Dubois versus Joe Joyce, but obviously it's turned out to be Daniel Dubois versus Nathan Gorman. Firstly, your thoughts on that fight, and do you expect Joe Joyce to fight the winner of that fight sometime perhaps at the end of 2019?
Yeah, I do think Joe will fight the winner of that fight. I think when after the shakedown, after we examined everything that went on, I think it was right for Daniel and Nathan to fight each other, and the winner fights Joe. I think that's the appropriate way. I think, with the greatest respect to Daniel and Nathan, I think Joe's at a slightly different level. What do I think is going to happen in that fight? I have Dubois for that fight. I know Joe's sat on the fence. I was ringside for Daniel against Richard Larty. I think he's got tremendous power. I think Nathan Gorman, I've seen him spar Joe. I think he's a terrific boxer. I think he's a higher level than people think he's at. I think he's, you know, if you analyse a boxer and different facets of them, I think he doesn't have many weaknesses. I think he scores very highly in all of them. But I think the difference is with Daniel Dubois, I think he's a 10 out of 10 in certain areas, and I think that's going to win it for him.
I mentioned Deontay Wilder too. We all know he defends his WBC title on Saturday night against Dominic Breazeale. What do you make of his comments claiming that he would like to have a body on his record?
Yeah, I haven't heard him say that. I watched his interview where he said that, I think he said he was paid, you know, it's legal to hit a man, he was paid for it, and that was okay to kill someone. Look, for me, that's not what boxing's about. You know, I think he said it's not an art. I think, you know, it is a sweet science. I don't think Joe Joyce goes in there to kill people. I don't want any of our boxers, you know, I think it's an easy thing to say, but having been around boxers and been involved in boxing long enough to know boxers who have had a fight and their opponent suffered a very serious injury, it's no joking matter. You know, there's respect at the end of a boxing match. You want to go in there and win. You know, some fights, there is real beef and real enmity between people, but I don't think that's right.
And when I last spoke to Joe Joyce, and this is going to obviously probably sound a bit funny to you because I know you work closely with David Haye, I asked Joe Joyce, would he ever entertain the idea of fighting David Haye? And he goes, absolutely. David Haye's retired, but we see it every day in boxing. You get fighters coming out of retirement. Some people say it's for that final payday. Some people say it's for that buzz, you know, just have it one more time. Would you be open to the idea of Joe Joyce fighting David Haye perhaps someday? I
think I'm open to everything. I think, you know, David was a terrific fighter, is a terrific fighter, and no opponent is a foregone conclusion for Joe. I don't think it's going to happen. I think David's at a different part of his life now. I think stylistically, Joe's probably not a great opponent for David. Stylistically, I mean, he's but similarly for Joe, you know, David's a mover and moves around a lot. May not be perfect for Joe, but I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't.
But never say never in boxing, though, right?
Never say never in boxing, but incredibly unlikely to happen. Wonder what David thinks.
I'll ask him when I see him next time. Adam Morallee, listen, thank you very much for your time. Always a pleasure. We hope all goes well on Saturday night. We look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.